we usually do these clubs, and we usually do like standalone graphic novels, and a lot of them are autobiographical or otherwise intellectual, and it's kind of really nice to have just a full-on comics, just fuck yeah comics.
Well, this is very autobiographical.
Yeah, is it?
It is like a memoir. No, it was this.
To the point. Yeah, you're fine. Don't worry.
No, it was Greg. I want Greg because I don't know if you can hear me on this thing, but I wanted it to be something that we did that encapsulated the spirit of our friendship, and also that was a love letter to all the kind of big event comics that I grew up on that helped me through hard times as well, that embraced sort of the giant, robust, bombastic comic book lunacy of Kirby and the kind of over-the-top storytelling that sometimes I think gets lost nowadays, and to sort of lean into that and do something that just spanned the whole DCU and said, this is why crazy comic books are awesome and also really helpful, especially when you're in a dark time.
Yeah. This is not where I usually start, but I actually want to start with this question with regard to metal. Do you think that this kind of crazy expression of what comics are is in a way more what comics are about than the monthly periodicals? Do you know what I mean? Like it's very easy to lose the thread on the monthly periodicals, but this is just like muscle and metal and violence and
Well, I think it was more like when they asked us to do an event, they have a lot of demands, and there are things that they want, and there are things they want an event to do to the line, and that they have
make money.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Those are our demands.
Yep.
Costume monkey boys.
Yep.
And for me, I think going back to our friendship and our relationship on Batman and coming into this, it was about leaning into the idea that events over the last couple of years had been very dark and very decompressed sometimes and had been very long. And what we wanted to do was sort of remind people how crazy, fun, inclusive, sort of celebratory an event could be, even while being dark. Like, it is dark and there's evil Batman and all of that, but we wanted it to feel almost like this is why comics are awesome, because it's a form that can do these stories that are so elastically, bizarre and inspiringly crazy that no other medium can do.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun in that regard too, to just embrace the sort of like, we're gonna do Starro and he's gonna talk like a 90s bro and just go for it and just do it. So
yeah. So let's talk, and I want both of you to answer this question. Why comics? Why is comics the form that you've embraced? I mean, I know you wrote short stories before this. You were also a teacher, but clearly you're known for comics. So what is it? Why comics?
Well, you want to go first, Greg?
You want to go first, Greg? No. Did you hear the question? Greg?
Oh, yeah, I heard the question. I thought Scott was going to answer.
Yeah, no, he pointed to you.
No, I mean, for me, if you want my answer, there's not much mathematics to it. I mean, my first comic, I think, was Adam Strange. It was a hand-me-down from an older cousin. And that was, I think, the very first comic I may have seen, I think. It's a long time ago. And but then, my mother would bring me around and I'd see it, one of the spinner racks wherever I was. And I started seeing those and, I was mesmerized. And by the age of 8, I just go, this is what I want to do. I was also heavy into Mad Magazine as a little kid too. So it was like, at that point, at 8 years old, I said, I want to draw for, Mad Magazine or draw superhero comics. But I knew that was it, and, I definitely leaned heavy into comic books. Every passing year, I just got obsessed with it in high school, junior high school. It's all I thought about doing was drawing, comic books. So it's just, I got bitten by the comics bug.
Yeah. Did you have any formal training?
No. As a matter of fact, I got, mostly F's in all of my art classes because incompletes because I was into chasing girls, smoking pot, and playing guitar, and so I skipped school a lot, and so I would never complete projects, and so I was notoriously bad at that, and So no formal training. So definitely college was out of the question because I just don't like people telling me what to do.
Yeah.
And so yeah, no, I everything I did, I learned from books and when I was coming up, it was different, than it is now, as far as, getting into the business. And it was also pre 9/11. So, there wasn't all the security in the lobby. So I would unannounced show up at the Marvel offices in Manhattan, and I would just get up on the elevator and I'd see the secretary there in the main waiting area. And I'd say, I came from Schenectady. Can someone look at my stuff? And somebody always would, including one time Jim Shooter, who was editor in chief at the time, came out and they gave me, pointers and, told me what books I should look at and, from everything from, figure drawing to film direction. And I met a lot of great editors who gave me a lot of great advice. And so when I came up, it was great. You had access to these people, It's a little more difficult now to get that same access if you can at all. So no, that my training came, from the advice from, that generation of just experts on making comics and the book recommendations. And then just a lot of life drawn from photographs, working out like, like an athlete, except with sketch pad and pencil.
Yeah, my understanding and is the first comic you did was Gore Shriek from Fanico.
Right.
Those of you who are very, very old will remember Fanico's ads.
That's right.
That's right. Fanico's ads in the comic books. They used to run ads that were merchandise, right? Like back before you couldn't used to get merchandise in most stores, right? And so the only way to do it was kind of through mail order. And I remember as a kid, like, oh, I could get like the Batmobile for the Mego figures if I order it through Fanico. Oh my God, I really want to do this. And they started publishing comics, and that was nearly 30 years ago, if my math is correct, right?
Yes.
So you were an overnight success, in other words.
Yeah. The funny thing about it, is, I never had interest in horror ever. I was just, tights and capes kind of guy, but that was the first comic door that opened for me, so I walked through it, of course, and then I get saddled with Todd McFarlane doing Spawn. And then I get typecast as I'm this horror guy, and I'm going, no, it's not me. And then I get, saddled with Kirkman on Haunt, going, no. And then I go, finally, I'm out of it. I'm going to go to what I always want to do. And I hook up with Scott Snyder, a horror writer. It's like, as soon as they think I'm out, they drag me back in. So, yeah, I guess it was in the cards for me.
That's pretty crazy. I really want to say, too, that, and I think that a lot of people haven't really processed in your head, you did like almost 125 issues of Spawn.
Not quite, but and it was pretty.
Well, I mean, if you count covers and doing some breakdowns for Todd, but I think I was closer to like 80 or so issues for the interiors.
But I mean, I'm including the breakdowns and stuff. I mean,
I did help
kind of from 26 to 175, something like that.
That's behind the scenes, I did things for Todd. He would joke that it's like the Wizard of Oz. He's the big head with the columns of flames on, the little man behind the curtain. And making it go on. So,
but that's an impressive fucking run for anybody, and I always feel like you've never been like kind of credited as much in my mind, as that's an achievement, right? Like 125 issues or something? That's insane.
Yeah. Well, I'm from a different generation, and a lot of these kids, and maybe they're doing it better than I am. I don't know. But they move around a lot. They get bored or whatever. But, the thing that drove me is when I was a kid and I was collecting comic books, and I would go to the store, and I had my favorites, and I followed artists more than I did writers, obviously because I'm an artist. And the biggest disappointment was showing up at the rack and finding that my favorite guy wasn't in there that month. And so, that was so disappointing to me. And I just always wanted to make sure that I didn't do that disappointment, to whoever my readers are. And so I always committed to doing, at least one full year before even thinking of going anywhere, So.
Yeah, but you did like 10 11 years
Yeah,
old.
well, working with Todd was, it was fun. He's an artist himself, and so that changed the dynamic of how typically a artist and writer work together, and so that was a lot of fun. We were just like two stupid kids, just having fun making comic books. So I guess there was no reason to want to leave. It was fun, and so yeah, and I'm still very close with Todd, and so yeah, I've been hanging around with this kid Scott a long time too now. So I mean, he's running, he's trying to catch up. And he's doing.
Yeah, Metal is like 125 issues just squished into six issues.
Yeah, I see that for sure. So what's your why comics? What's like?
Oh, it was just I wanted to do it since I was a little kid. I don't know. I mean, my dad used to take me to the old Forbidden Planet on 11th Street and Broadway every Wednesday, and it was a way. He told me later, he was like, it was a way to encourage me to read. I mean, so I wasn't a big reader. I was shy and video games and whatever, and he thought it would be a good way in, and so he'd always loved comics, and we went every week. And then when I went away for the summer to summer camp, he would send me my subscription, and it was all I wanted to do. And all the way through high school, I had a portfolio. I thought I would be like a comic book writer and artist, and then I got to college and realized I just wasn't good enough at the art. And I fell into writing. It was a time when there was a lot of excitement around like short story writing. Stephen King had done a lot of short stories right then, and it had sparked a big renaissance, I think. There were a lot of big short story writers at that moment. And I had good teachers, and so I did that. And but comics was always the thing I wanted to do. So the minute I started publishing stories, and comic book editors came sniffing around being like, these seem like comic kind of stories with supernatural elements and whatever, I jumped right back in. So it was all I ever wanted to do. And I mean, there wasn't, I don't know, it was weird. I feel like Greg knows my parents well, and I'm always sort of like, I'm a writer, you're not supposed to be supportive. You're supposed to give me like, hardship and anxiety and be like, but from the moment I wanted to do it. Yeah. All right. The moment I wanted to do it, they were like, okay, do it. And you're like, that's not what you're supposed to say. Yeah. So they're like, we'll get you the writing books and whatever. And so I never had any sense that it wasn't possible, just because I was always like, this is it. And so I did all the really stupid stuff that is incredibly geeky. Like I went away to writing camp for summers, like when everybody else was at sports camp. I went to Iowa City and like took 8 weeks of writing, you know what I mean? And I was like, this is so cool. And everybody, it was like everyone would beat me up about it, whatever. But no, it was just all I ever wanted to do. And I feel like I have the upside is, I had a very supportive background, and I feel like I was able to train at it as much as I could. So the downside is I have like absolutely no practical life skills outside of that one column of talent. Yeah. So like I love writing prose. I love writing comics. I know my stuff around, and I've studied as much as I possibly could. The same way, like one of the stories that I love about Greg is he'll talk about when he was learning to draw, he would go down to the train station and put on sunglasses and just do figure drawing. And draw different people there for the acting. Yeah. And, for me, that's the way I was about writing. It was always the only thing. So any job I had, whether I was working as a janitor or a teacher, I did a lot of odd jobs. It was always at night, I'm the elf, like working through the night to try and be a writer. So, again, I'm proud of that, and yet on the other side, I'm like the least well-rounded person ever. I'm like a total cube when it comes to being well-rounded about.
Well, it seems to me too. You've had this incredibly. Lucky might be the wrong word, but as I understand it, your first book of short stories immediately became a sensation. You have two of those short stories were put in the Best American Short Stories.
Yeah, I mentioned.
Collection, right? That King was editing that year.
Yeah.
And like that doesn't happen to new writers usually, right?
I was really lucky that actually the Zoetrope, who the offices are not far from here, they were the first people that found me off the slush pile. I feel like one of the things I would, if there are any like writers out there or creators starting, I had a very rocket ship ride in comics, but I paid my dues like in prose. There was, I started in 2000. I graduated, graduate school, and then it was 7 years before, or 6-7 years before I really started getting published. So there was like hundreds and hundreds of rejection letters, sure. And multiple rejection letters, and teachers or people saying you're never going to do it and that stuff. So in that field, I feel like I had my share of like the fire that's going to be like that forges who you are going forward about what you want to do. But the first place that ever published me was Zoetrope, and it's like right near here. I actually today on the way here I was like, are those offices closed? Can I show up and like knock on the door? They would totally like be like security. They wouldn't know who I am, but I was going to be like, you guys published me long ago, and that made me believe in myself.
Yeah. Thank you, Zoetrope.
Yeah.
But then you come along with not the very first comic. That you had a couple things at Marvel, but from most people's point of view, you came out of nowhere with American Vampire, and you've got Stephen King co-write. Stephen King had written comics up to that point, but not.
He had
serialized,
yeah,
right? It was a totally different thing. So where did that come? That just blows me away.
Well, so I pitched American Vampire to Vertigo, and I had a couple, like you said, like small projects at Marvel and whatever, and it got rejected, and I had to re-pitch it and sort of rejigger it, and they finally accepted it, and it was like the best day ever. I remember exactly where I was. I was buying a gift for my friend. I was in a model shop in the West Village buying a Doctor Who set, and I got the call from Mark Doyle that they accepted it, and I was just over the moon. And then a couple days later, they asked me, we're going to announce it. Do you have anyone that you know that might be willing to blurb it or say something nice? And I had known Stephen King. He had, like you said, he had liked my short story. So I was like, well, I think I might be able to ask Stephen King. So I asked him, and he was like, send me the pitch. And I sent it to him. And he was like, well, I like this enough that, if you want, I'll write an issue or two, and you can tell him that. And I was like, first of all, I wish you had told me that before I sold it, like, in the first place, because, I would have made some money. And secondly, if I tell them that, they're going to want you to write, like, issue 1 and 2, and not me. But he was very generous and was like, just tell them. So I told Vertigo, and I remember I called them on a Friday afternoon, and they had all left the office. And then Monday morning at like 8:30 a.m., I got a conference call. It was like, did you actually say that Stephen King would write it, Yeah. And he was great. He was supposed to just write one issue, and we were going to split it into these 5-page chapters over the first 5 issues. And instead, he was like, he wrote me, I remember his first email was like, I think I'm going a little bit off the res, Scott. And it was like a 30-page script, And it was incredible. What I loved about working with Stephen King was just that, he's a rock star forever. And he could phone it in and do a great job. But the fact that he hands in a 30-page script for a 20-page comic when most of us do less, he lives in the world of the story that he's working on, and he acts like a hungry young writer, even when he's doing something that's his 100th project. Yeah. And he was so invested. I mean, that was what was so amazing. And so when we come back with it again in 2020, hopefully we'll be able to bring him in some capacity. Nice. He's always been a huge supporter. I still talk to him about it, and he's great. Like, he's amazing. So
that's super cool.
Yeah. And he's also loves being Stephen King, which is awesome. Where you like one time my wife and I, we were driving through Florida, and he saw that we were driving through Florida, and he called and he's like, I see you're near Sarasota. I'm down here. You should come by the house. And we're like, all right. So you come by the house, and he's like, I made you microwave spaghetti. And it's this beautiful house, like, on a bluff, and like, all right. And he's like, just move that piece of shit off the table. And the piece of shit was, like, the manuscript to the Under the Dome, whatever. And you're, like, shaking as you move this thing. He's like, whatever. And then he's like, let's go out on the dock. And you go out on the dock, and he has, like, an old lantern, and it's this rickety dock that's, like, out on this cliff. And he's sort of like, it'd be a shame if somebody fell off this thing, and you're very aware that you're like on a dock where you would die with Stephen King. Like he's awesome in that way. He's just very funny, and he's just so supportive of young writers. He was just, I was nobody, and he was extremely kind to me, and even working on American Vampire, he would end all of his issues with some joke where he'd be like, and then Skinner turns into a bat and flies away. And then I'd be like, oh my God, I have to tell Stephen King that our vampires don't do that stuff. And I would tell him, and he would be like, oh, I'm just fucking with you. You know? And then he would do it again, and I would fall for it all over again.
Yeah.
But he was a big comic fan. The Bernie Wrights and stuff, he had worked with Bernie
Sure.
on Creep Show and all
Sure.
that. And he knew his stuff really well, and he was just a joy. So I can't say enough good things about him.
Yeah. You guys, you know, it's interesting because the two of you have kind of very different paths. You came out of nowhere with American Vampire. You spent 10 years working on Spawn, but both cases you guys were working with legends. And I wonder, is being in the shadow of that, is that hard? Is that easy? Is it freeing? Because you know that everybody will believe.
No, it's not easy.
You know?
No, it's not easy. Yeah, it's, really, especially difficult in the beginning, because everybody, when they came on board, Spawn hated me. They were all going, crucify, where's Todd? Get rid of this guy, and Todd would publish some of the hate mails, and I would, this is agonizing. And he'd tell me, calm down, this is the plan, because, the people who like you are then going to start standing up for you and fighting the people who don't like you. And so I had to suck that up, but and then eventually, that as a matter of fact, that's a component of why I never missed a beat on Spawn, is because I go, I'm going to be in these little fuckers' faces every goddamn day. I'm never going to take a break. I'm just going to keep flushing their head in my toilet, and I did that. And but working, it's Todd McFarlane. It's a big name, obviously, and you're never going to have another, Todd McFarlane, I don't think. And so that was difficult. And and then, so I think actually, getting away from Todd was probably my best career move, along with getting together with Todd, because, I had done so much and I had a great time and everything like that. And I grew and experimented and all that. And now, I'm being judged on my own merits, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because when you're doing that, you're always going to be compared. Is he better? Is he as good? Is he, all that, and to get away from that is definitely a benefit, to be judged on your own in your own light without a shadow over you. So, it wasn't the easiest thing, but I loved it. I had a great time, and I love Todd, and I would, not trade back any of the time that I stayed under his shadow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you feel any apprehension, especially that first issue, if he turned in a 30-page script and it was a 20-page comic? Like, are you like, I've got to write negative 10 pages now? Or
No, you mean for my...
Yeah, just like, what were your perspective, like, following Stephen King? Not following Stephen King, but you know what I mean, right?
I was sure that basically what would happen was everyone would love him. At first I was really excited, because I was like, oh, so many people are going to read this because Stephen King is on it. And, it's gonna make the comic sell and whatever. And then I was like, I remember again exactly where I was. I was in Target, and I was pushing a cart, and I just stopped, and I was like, holy shit, everybody is gonna love his stuff and hate mine. And then as soon as he drops off the book, it's gonna tank. And why did I do this? This is the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life, and it was awful. And so I had to write for my life. I remember just being like, I won't be as good as him, but I have to give this my absolute best. And, luckily it worked out, and people stayed with the book, post it.
And you won an Eisner for Best New Series that year, which is, for a new writer, almost the greatest honor.
It was incredible for that, and then the Harvey, all of it. Then the funniest was we won the Eisner, and I remember I was so proud of it. And I was holding it, and it has like a ball that spins around. You've seen them, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm like holding it for a picture, and I was like, talking about I'm so proud, I don't deserve it, and the ball fell off the thing, and it was like boop boop boop, and literally somebody was walking by and almost kicked it, and it was like Indiana Jones where you're diving for this thing, and it was just awful. So it was definitely a nightmare, your nightmare come to life moment.
And so I'm assuming that after all the attention that American Vampire got, that's when they offered you Detective.
Mm-hmm, yeah, that's right.
And clearly, you were doing a run in Detective, that the Black Mirror storyline, that you were setting up all the stuff for the Court of Owls. You were trying to figure that out. At what point did you know that story was something bigger? Was it as you were laying it out, or
the Court of Owls?
Yeah.
You never know. I remember just being they're going to kick me off the book. That's always the way you operate, with this notion that this is your dream job. You think you get like a very small shot at it, and that you're going to get to do one thing. And then once you're done with that one thing, they'll figure out you're a fraud and they'll kick you out. So with Court of Owls, it was just everything I ever wanted to say about Batman. I wrote it at a time when I had gotten married and moved out of the city, and I went back to visit my family and my friends, and the whole area that I had grown up in had changed tremendously. And I remember being so unsettled by that. Nobody I knew still lived there. All the stores were different. Everything was changed. And I remember thinking, well, I have this Batman book I'm supposed to write. He knows the city better than anybody, but the city is only made up of the relationships that exist at that moment. The story that you know, the people you know, same as here in San Francisco. I imagine the city is only the life that is in that community at that moment, and then it's gone. So if I could weaponize that against him and have history sort of come to life and say, well, you only know us at this moment, you only know the city for this second, then I'd have something special. And it was a big fight because, you know, when you're new and you say, I want to do a year-long story, their argument is always, well, if nobody likes it, you're going to get stuck with it for a year. And that chills you to, like, your bones. And you have to be like, I know that. So what?
Sure.
I'm going to do it anyway. But luckily, with talent like Greg and, you know, the powerhouse that he is on it, it worked out well. So it was terrifying. I mean, he'll tell you, like, he knows me very, very well. He's seen me at like my worst many times where I'm like, I think I'll just call in sick for like 2018. You know what I mean? Like that. Like that's he's seen me very, very down and out. But you know, that's part of the relationship. He's my brother. Like we pick each other up, and you know, I owe him tremendously. Like he's like, we're gonna do this, kid. And I'm like, all right, we're gonna do it.
Yeah. So when you pitched Court of Owls, I guess, did you know at that point the New 52 was happening?
No.
Or it was totally separate?
No, I thought, and it's same as him, I thought I was going to be on like Batman number 700 and whatever, and they hired me to do it, and they were like, we want you to move over, and it was going to be really casual. And then I had started writing it, and they were like, well, it's actually going to be Batman number 1. And they called me into the office to tell me this because they knew I would totally freak out. And I still remember to this day, Dan DiDio, he was standing next to this Batman pinball machine that they had in the office. And Jim Lee was there too, and Jim was sort of playing it on the side, and it kept lighting up, and it was like, you know, the Batman looked really angry in it, and it was like, it was just this tremendous like pressure machine, and they were like, and it's gonna be Batman number 1, isn't that amazing? I remember almost like throwing up in the office. I can't do that, you know, and you know, and then I remember, yeah, I just went home and I was like, you know, you have one shot and that's it. Like this is, and I try and approach every arc like that even now and just be like, if you wrote nothing else, what is the one thing you would do if you could leave this arc and nothing else? And that was the beginning of that. I mean, Black Mirror was that too, but this was really that, where it was like, okay, the spotlight is going to swing over and be like, now you're on a number 1, you're rebooting for the first time in 70 whatever years. Batman, you better bring your A game, and that was it. You know, so
double A
I
game.
remember being terrified myself, and you know, because I'd always been a Marvel guy growing up, and never considered, you know, that I'd be working for DC. And so when I was talking to both companies, you know, before getting together with Scott on that, you know, I didn't know, as he didn't know, that it would be Batman number 1. And once I found out, I was just so terrified. I remember telling my wife all the time, maybe I should have just gone with the Marvel gig, you know, and the pressure was unbelievably high for me. And I've done so many comic books, and yet all of a sudden, decades into my career, you know, it wore off, you know, as I went past issue 1 and I started to calm down in issue 2 and 3. I just got pissed off and said, do what you do, bitch. And then I was all right. And but yeah, it's a scary thing, you know. And then, you know, they didn't tell me. They go, it's Batman related. They did the non-disclosure thing, so I couldn't talk, and then they let me know, but they never told me that it would be relaunching from number 1, and that was terrifying, because, you know, Batman fans are rabid, and they will kill you if you mess him up. And so the only hedge I had was to blame the writer, should it fail.
Yeah. That was best. There were a couple times when people like questioned what we did. And like when we announced 0 Year, which was the origin redo, and everybody hates when you redo the origin, and so I was getting all this shit online, and I was really upset about it. I remember being like, God, this sucks, right? He was like, uh-huh. And I was like, well, you're getting it too, right? Like, they're mad at you. And he was like, well, I'm sure somebody is out there. And I was so upset. I totally Google search. I like Google searched his name, and there was like nothing but like, oh, so sorry you got to work with that asshole. And that was it. Like there was like nothing, and it was all on me. Like whatever.
That's kind of funny. Yeah, I mean the idea of being put on the first Batman #1 that's actually a Batman #1 in 70 years is pretty insane. I'm not clear on the timeline here. Did you, when you were drawing it, did you know that was Batman #1 or?
Oh yeah, yeah. At the time I was drawing it, I finally it was revealed, and I believe it hindered my performance. Because I was so uptight. I wish I could go back and redraw #1, so that'd be more consistent with the following issues. But it is what it is, and it's a long time ago now. But yeah, they let me know, and that was just like throw up a little bit in your mouth when you find out.
Did you know Scott at that point? Had you guys spoken or?
No, I didn't know Scott at all. Sorry to say, obviously, other people did, but I didn't know. It was a mastermind of my old editor on X-Force, which is Bob Harris, who's the editor-in-chief over there now. And so he put us together much like a boy band gets assembled, So, I don't know why he said these two will work, because it sure didn't seem like it was going to work when we first got together. There's some friction because our approaches were very different, and we were both comfortable in those, especially me, being I've been in it a little longer than Scott. But he, for whatever reason, whatever he saw, he had some good gut instinct, because it sure worked out. I still don't know what it is. I don't know why, fans like Scott and I together so much. I'm grateful for it, and I hope it lasts longer, because you never can tell. But yeah, whatever he had in his head it's worked out, and I ended up being, best friends with Scott, and I love him. And even if I never drew another comic book again, I'd be friends with him for the rest of my life and love him, like I do now. So whatever Bob Harris did, I'm grateful for it, So
yes. So what was the creative conflict, I guess, at the beginning?
I was just sort of an asshole, I think, back then. No, I was really scared. I was really terrified. It was Batman #1, and the only thing I knew was how to write full script, intensely full script, because Jock and the people I had worked with up to that point had really wanted that. They had wanted, and they would change it, but it was that. Mm-hmm. And Greg was used to working more Marvel style, which is more outline, giving him a lot more latitude to kind of create along the way. And I was just really terrified of letting go of what I knew how to do. So I was just really like, well, this is how I do this, and this is how we, this is why I've done well, and he humored me, yeah.
Oh yes, you did quite a bit of bragging, my friend. Yeah, it's like, because I was, I've told this story so many times, I figured everybody's heard it by now, but I'll tell bits of it again. So, first let me back up. So yeah, I was raised Marvel style. So that meant, loose outline, gave you all the important bits of dialogue so that you can hit the emotional marks here and there. And, but you paced it out, you directed it, how many panels are on the page, up to you, and all that stuff. It's you.
So
let me just ask, when you get a script from Todd, is it like, how long is it? Is it like
I didn't get scripts from Todd. See, this is where I was going. So I started with Marvel style, which was, this, plot style really. And then I moved over with Todd, and it was never, I don't have anything written from Todd. It was phone conversations. And sometimes I would take notes, later on when I got a little more sophisticated, I recorded them on a microset. And we would just talk about it, and he'd say things like, give me 3 pages of Sam and Twitch. They're going to be talking about this. It didn't matter what I did with them, as long as I can get to the place he needed to go with the story wise. And he'd say, give me some room over here because I have a lot to say. And he would give me, important bits of dialogue that would be said, or give me loose idea of what they'll be talking about sometimes. But it was so it was even looser, And so then when I got with Scott for 20, I think the first issue was 24 pages, and I forgot how many pages of reams of paper I went through for my printer, printing out Scott's script, and I told Scott, listen, kid, just give me the important words, and he goes, they're all important. And then he started, bragging about his achievements and his awards for this and his this, and I'm pretty damn good at this, and I'm reading this thing, and my wife is over my shoulder going, who does he think he is? And I'm going, I don't know. He's a young kid, doesn't know me from anything, and I says, I read all his, King Kong chest beating bravado. And I said, what do I say to this kid? And so I typed, I'm sure your mother is very proud. Send. And God is such a sweet kid. He didn't even realize I kicked him in the balls. He shoots back an email going, yes, my family is very close-knit and supportive. And I'm going, boy, this is how sweet of a kid he is. You kick him in the nuts, and he doesn't even understand he'd been neutered. So anyway, so I told Scott that's not true, that all the words are important. And we butted heads like that in the beginning. And I kept assuring my wife, who was certainly the most defensive as any loving wife would be, that he'll settle down once I realize I'm not gonna drown his baby, and I knew that's what it was about. And I said, once he sees what I can do, he'll relax. And sure enough, so with age comes a bit of wisdom sometimes, most of the time, hopefully. And so the more I did, the more Scott would just back up a step. And I think even Scott might tell me I'm wrong, but I thought Scott was told by Todd even, just get out of his way. You'll get the best from Greg if you just move away from him. Yeah. And so Scott is progressively throughout our working relationship just moved further and further back now, because I used to tell him, Scott, you're not getting paid by the word. That's number one. You're not getting paid by the word. And let me do the heavy lifting. And now he's really letting me do the heavy lifting. He'll write scripts that go pages 2 through 47. And he gives me this big giant block, and that's okay. In the beginning, it's been so long, working with him that I hadn't done that. I was nervous that I'd be rusty, but it's all coming back how to break it down and pace it out and all that stuff like that. But yeah, Scott's really taking it to heart now. He's going, I didn't even write it. Just draw some stuff and I'll put words to it later.
Best way to add to that?
No, it's totally accurate. Like it is. I will say, like, the moment I realized that Todd was right and you were right, it was really early in our run. It was when we were doing Batman #5, which is the one that like spins around. Mm-hmm. And it was the first time I didn't know what I wanted to do visually. And I realized at that point, seeing Greg's art, that he was just better as a director than I was. And I didn't know how to make this comic communicate. We wanted you to feel really scared and unsettled, and it was
disoriented like Batman was.
Yeah, right. We wanted you to feel like the most scared you've ever been reading a comic, and completely disoriented. And I said to him I remember getting to that part and just being like, you know what, I'm gonna give it a shot. And I wrote that issue very light. It was like, there was dialogue and stuff at the beginning, and then the rest of it was mostly sort of open description about, here's the things he needs to see, but do it. And I was really scared. I remember being like, well, what if I have to go back over this with dialogue and it doesn't fit? Mm-hmm. And it was the best experience. And it was what he turned in with, and the ideas he had for the book turning all the way around and all that stuff that got us such recognition. Mm-hmm. That came from giving him the room to do what he does best. So it really was... our like emotional arc, or the curve of our friendship was a different thing, but the curve of our creative working relationship on Batman, to me, was my growth, not his. Like, Greg grew a lot as an artist on the book, where I see issue 1 and I see what he does now, and it's more just him letting loose and being himself and all the talents that he has on display. But for me, it was very much like I learned to write because he's such a good brother and mentor on the book. Like I've learned more from working with him than ever in my life as a not just a comic writer, but as a collaborator, being able to give the people that you work with, whether it's editorial, whether it's a letterer, whether it's a colorist, the room to do what they do best and not control it and let go of it so it becomes better than you could have made it yourself.
Yeah.
So no, I'm very grateful for that. As much as I was, terrified and wrong and all that kind of I wouldn't change any of that stuff. Like that's my story, like my arc, was that.
The thing about this approach too, I'm also, been a musician and played in bands, most of my life and things like that. And I relate, what we're doing to that, because I mean, you can play a song and you can read sheet music or whatever, but it's when you get together and just jam and spontaneous things happen, and you play off each other, that is just gives you the most joy and fun. It's just a good time. And so doing this way, to me, I would think that every writer would want to do that, because you get all these happy surprises along the way. It's like you give me your idea, I interpret your idea, and maybe I do it exactly like you envision, or maybe I present you with some surprises, and that should be fun to you. And especially if you're a notable writer who fancies himself so powerful, well, then you should be able to roll with those things that are unexpected, and your creativity should then be able to blossom and cover that bet, even though it was completely outside of what you envisioned in your original script. And to me, that should be fun. And that, to me, that's what keeps a comic book looking fresh and alive. And that's another reason why I don't get in the way of FCO when he colors, or Jonathan when he inks, unless I have something very specific in mind. I really keep out of their way. I don't say anything to them other than great job. And I get surprised all the time, of what they give me back, especially with FCO. I mean, you just go, wow, I never envisioned it that way. And it's so great. So I think making comics this way keeps them fresh and alive. And it also should keep all the talent who's working on the book more satisfied and more enthusiastic. And I'll tell you too, I imagine I'm gonna make another, relation to why I think a writer should have that approach of embracing surprises that an artist might present to him, and then writing from that. I think that expands a writer's creativity in the same way that one of the experiments that, when I was trying to get into comics, and I told you I met a lot of great guys who gave me a lot of great pointers and tips. And someday I'll write a book and pass them on to, wannabe creators. And one of the great bits of advice is draw your panel shapes first, and then try and fit a composition inside that panel. And so, that's a challenge. Some panels, if you have a certain subject matter, and you now have to make a composition, and it has to work in this panel, I mean, that tests you, it pushes you, and it expands you. And so I think just as that experiment worked for me to expand my creativity, I think doing that, presenting a writer with surprise that he didn't foresee, will have that exact same effect. So I think everybody grows, I think, together, when you get out of each other's way and you let some spontaneity happen, I think you all grow, which is the idea of life in general. So.
Yeah. What, I don't know if you can come up with it off the top of your head, but what was the biggest surprise that you ever got back?
From Greg?
From Greg, yeah.
He always surprises me with stuff, but I mean, it's always him doing what I asked for and then doing it better than I could have imagined it. So I think it was 0 Year was the stuff that was my favorite. That was my favorite arc, I think, on the book, because A, I wrote it for my kids, and B, it was where I really felt we took complete ownership of our version of the character, where I was in San Diego a couple years before having like a complete panic attack and meltdown about how am I the writer of Batman, and there's hundreds of thousands of people reading this book, and there's millions of dollars of pressure on it, because every once in a while they'll fucking remind you of that, by the way. Like, they will have you out to Warner Brothers Studios, and you go up the building, and you're there, and there are dudes in suits that are like, so what's your next year on this book? And it's like marketing, foreign rights, collected editions, toys, publicity, like everybody. And you're just in a room with a PowerPoint that you don't know how to work, and you're sort of like, And they're like, why is this going to be like Q2, Q3, Q4 important, meaning quarter, financial, whatever. And you suddenly realize, like, all these people...
Scott Snyder, bitch!
Yeah, right. That's why I just have Greg say that, and that's it. And I take the mic, I just drop the mic, and I just walk out. No, but, I mean, it reminds you very quickly that, like, there's a whole ecosystem of work that goes into these things, and there is, like, a lot more money than you remember going, like, depending on this stuff, like millions and millions of dollars. So, you know, for me, I mean, I think, I don't know, I still get terrified of all that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I get really, really scared, but there are moments where
Scott sometimes wanders off the question, so I'm gonna give him a piece that he can.
Wait, what was, I forgot what the question was. I totally got lost in my head.
Originally, what surprised you? But
Oh, wait, I'll tell you.
Okay, so sometimes it could be like I introduce an element based on his story, and I'll give you an example. I think it was Death in the Family where I started to do things with flies. And how it connected to the Joker. And so then when Scott sees things like that, this is what I'm talking about, you know, it inspires him and he starts writing that into the story. And when you do things like that, you get these happy surprises. It's just like, you know, anybody who's ever painted and all of a sudden you throw a color down next to another color and it has this magical transformative effect. It's a lot like that. So when we got to the end of the story and, you know, Scott, you know, wanted to leave the question mark, you know, was the Joker really in the Batcave and all this? Because I introduced that motif early on and he wrote it going forward, all of a sudden he goes, I need something at the end. And he had the screen show, you know, and I go, I know, I'll put a fly on the screen. And he goes, that's perfect. So that's sort of the magical stuff that I'm trying to talk to you about, tell you about. And these are the wonderful things about making comics that keep it alive. So the comic that we started, the story that we started, stayed alive all the way to the final hour when Scott goes, I need something. I need something. And so I think and I go, that's it, you know? And so to me, that's the beauty of it. So it's sometimes those kind of surprises too. It might not be something, oh my God, why did you do that? You know, and it could be that I just introduced something that I think will take Scott's story to the next level. Like when I read Scott's scripts, which are always great and inspiring, is I try and distill them to their essence, and because that's the thing you have to stay true to. That you can take deviations as long as you keep the essence and keep it on that road that's going to get you to the final destination. And so when I read those things, I go, it might be cool to add this kind of motif or whatever. And then Scott sees that and we go. And so sometimes it's not these dramatic, like, oh my God, why did he draw Alfred naked? You know, it's more things like that.
Yeah.
Wait, I remember, I'm sorry, I went down like my anxiety hole about like being in front of the whole, but I remember what I was going to say, which was that, you know, I'll go up there and I'll talk about why metal is going to be great or why I think it's important and why it's personal. And then all I have to do is then show them Greg's designs, which are exactly that. Like, as much as I describe the thing, they're always a big surprise. So I'll say, we have a Batman who's from another dimension, but if Batman killed the Joker and the Joker's heart contained this toxin to make anyone that killed him the next Joker, and so you have this crazy Batman Joker, and he's going to be, you know, this. I know he's going to be a hit, and I know he's going to be great, and I know, and they'll just sort of nod and nod and nod, and then they'll be like, show the art, and then you show the design, and then they're like, oh, and it's that exact moment that sort of speaks to, I think, his ability to both translate what I'm trying to communicate perfectly and also elevate it beyond what I could do on my own, even when I'm trying to explain it, you know, in a way where I'm very maniacal about this is why it's important, you know.
So how much of your creative process between the two of you specifically is sort of pre-conversation, just like getting on the phone and just talking about it, and how much of it is you sitting down writing something and then seeing what he gives you back?
We're really, I mean, Greg's my brother, like we're family, and I saw Jamie going by in the background. I was like, Jamie, his wife, like we're friends, you know, so I always feel comfortable. Like I just called him, 3 days ago to talk about the design, the last night stuff. So, you know, we try and give each other room to play, you know, so I'll give him the script, but we'll talk about it beforehand. I told him the whole story of like the book we're doing for Black Label. You know, from beginning to end, and then I'll ask him, what do you think? And So I mean, we're very collaborative in that regard. There's no barrier. It's all transparent. So there's no way that I would like, here's the script.
Right.
You know, if he has anything he has a question about, or I have anything that I'm second guessing, we just go back and forth.
Even how we just created the most recent incarnation of the Batman costume has happened just sort of on the fly over the past couple days. I mean, we knew Scott's script had it in the beginning, loosely where we're going with that, but we just transformed it on one page as Batman's doing his thing, and just that's it. We talk and we go, hey, it'd be cool as if this happens, and you go, that's a great idea, and I really want that to happen, so it looks like this, and so we could get there. And so it's always fluid with us. I mean, I get the script, as I said, they're great and they're intact and easy to understand and easy to inspire, but we're always, and Scott is notorious for this. He'll hand me a finished script that there's no such thing as finished. He's to the final hour. You haven't drawn that page yet, have you? Because I had this other idea, and so that can happen on page 22 when you work with Scott.
Yeah. I assume that when you're working with someone over the long haul, when you're talking about a 4 or 5 year collaborative process like in Batman, that there's
like 7 now.
Yeah, sure. There becomes a sort of telepathy, between the two of you.
Well, we know each other well enough. Like, he's like my best friend. I mean, I know what I think he's going to enjoy and what I think is going to be a slog, and what so there's definitely like beyond shorthand where I know, like, and that's why we talk about the stuff first, So I feel very, there's definitely like, it's not a conventional relationship where you're meeting somebody, a new artist, and you're trying to figure out how to write for them. I mean, Greg, I'll just be like, what do you think of this?
Sure. Well, this is what I was curious about, that when you do a book like, say, All-Star Batman, where you're working with creator after creator, I mean, many of whom you've worked with before, but some of them you had never worked with before in your life. What's your default position, I guess, when writing a script?
Well, this comes from Greg.
Overdoing it or no? Okay.
No, and this is to Greg's credit. My first move is to ask them how they like to work, and that's what I do now. So I'll say to for example, I've been doing a lot of stuff with Francis Manipul, or with Jorge Jimenez, who's like the handsomest dude in comics, and nobody should never take a picture with this guy. You look like a troll forever. I only work with artists who are like more muscular and handsome than me and whatever. It's just a horrible curse. But anyway, including Greg. But what I try and do is I'll immediately say, how do you like to work? Do you like to work full script? Do you want to talk it out on the phone? Like, what do you want to do? So, and that comes from working with him, where I realize you get the best out of people by allowing them to do what they do best and giving them the room to do that. So,
because everybody has different skill sets, It's like I was raised, from Marvel fathers who taught me to work that way and taught me about direction, film direction. And but there's other artists who don't know a thing about direction. Hopefully the writer does, because they're dependent on them, and they want I've had artists tell me, I want the writer to tell me everything. I go, how do you live that way? Then you're just essentially a draftsman. I would hate that, because I go, then you just have to have draftsman skill, and that's it. That's all you need. To me, you can put anybody in my place at that point. And so I don't enjoy that. But a writer, that's the advice, that should be given to all writers, is know who you're saddling with. And same for the artist. Know who you're saddling with, because otherwise it could be a really horrible experience, and you won't get the best product. If you are not playing to each other's strengths and you ignore, again, bringing back music, when you're young in a band, what you do is you tell a singer, we want to do these songs, whether that singer can sing them or not. And the singer tries like hell to sing them. And in most always, the song is not good because it's beyond that particular singer's skill set. And so it's a lot like that. You really have to know who you're with and allow them to work in a comfortable way, and what they're best at and what they're not good at, you avoid. And so
you get a script from him, and you've got the blank page in front of you. What's your process? Do you thumbnail out the whole 22 pages or whatever?
I know. Some guys do the whole thing. I mean, when I was younger and more foolish, I just used to I didn't lay anything out other than on the boards. I would just start going. I don't have as much confidence as I did when I was a young kid. And so now, you know, I do thumbnail out, but I don't do the whole book. I know like JR does the whole thing and one clip and everything like that. And maybe others do too, but I'll do like scenes or in the case of this 48-page monster, I go, okay, I'll lay out half the book so I could start working. So, cause I spend more time and thought on it, of how I want to direct it and all that now than I used to when I was young, just went entirely by gut. I wish I had some of that in me at this point, but I don't. Again, you know, I try and think about what would best serve the scene. You know, as far as the pacing, you know, where I put the camera, you know, how I light it, you know, and I put an awful lot of thought and care into the acting. And I've always put a lot into the acting. I think that's one of the most integral parts of doing this stuff. I mean, and certain people notice. I mean, back on Spawn, you know, Sam and Twitch were a couple of characters. I love drawing those guys. And Big Sam Burke was, you know, patterning away after one of my close friends who passed recently, Emrico, and he was a real sloppy kind of guy and very overweight and spill food on him at the second bite in. And so I would have like Sam like smashing his fist, you know, grabbing the peanuts out of the bowl, and the bowl be like half tilted and peanuts are flying, and you know, food popping out of his mouth, and all those, you know, help to develop a character, you know, and along with their body language and their expression. So I put a lot of thought into that as I'm going through, you know. So my process, you know, it kind of encompasses it all, you know, and sometimes even late in the game, like this scene I'm drawing right now, all of a sudden I got a different vision, you know. So I got rid of some of my layouts and I'm changing because I want to change the lighting and the props a little bit around. So yeah, I you know, a lot of it is still instinctual to the point where I have a difficulty describing exactly my process.
Sure.
What I do when I get Scott's scripts is I'll read them, you know, a few times in a row. And what happens when I read scripts is a movie plays in my head. And so I'll watch that movie. And unfortunately, comics is not exactly like movies. So I have to now also be in the edit room and go, okay, well, that can't work too. It takes too long to tell it that way. How can I tell that same scene in another way? And so I go into the editing room in my head and I find out what works, and then and find out, you know, and contemplate again what will sell that scene the best possible way in the space that I have. Scott gives me some things that would be great in a movie, like you know, and I read them and I go, it won't work in this medium. It'd take up too much room and it wouldn't have to be as effective. And so I'll have to maybe do the scene differently. If I had a film camera, we'd go to town, you know, because I could set up a bunch of different cameras and have all these fast edits. So there's that limitation. So when I see the movie in my head, I pick and choose what will work, what won't work for various reasons, and I keep those ideas and go from there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I wonder though, when you're talking about a book like Metal, especially where it's specifically structures and events, and there's a lot of money riding on this in a way that, like, so like if you write a bad issue of Batman the comic, they can replace you the next month, right? If they had to, right? But on this, they can't, because they built their tent pole around this. They built the entire quarter around it. So is there more editorial back and forth with the editor, or do they just get out of your way and just trust you, Greg?
They might interact with Scott. I don't hear from anybody, and I prefer it that way. And the few times that I've heard from somebody, it's somebody much younger than me who knows a lot less. And so they'll tell me, you know, what they think I should have done with the scene, and I'll explain to them why they're wrong. And then I'll say, now sit down and let me just do my thing. So no, I have virtually no contact outside of Scott, other than great job, we love the pages, you know. So yeah, Scott's the only one I talk to. He, as he said, he goes down to Burbank and stuff, and they might powwow together. And again, I got the sweet spot of it. It's a success. I go, yes, great, us. And if it's bad, I go, it's that guy. You know?
Yeah. Well, so let me ask you the same question then. Is there a lot of pressure on you because of the tentpole of this? I mean, is this in
I
terms
can
of
show him the text from where I'm talking
Yeah.
about ledge, Scott. There's always pressure on Scott.
There is a lot of pressure. You know, you have to be able to go there and block it out and be able to say to them, I mean, Metal in particular, this was like this, they fought us at first on everything, from the title to the length of it, to the amount of tie-ins, to the plot, to all of it.
Everything
Like,
froze on me over here.
I can still hear
we
you.
can still hear you though. You're good.
The
Okay.
He'll probably restart you and start you again.
there you are.
Oh, he's back.
You're
There
back.
you go. Great.
All right. Kind of weird, but
Yeah, it's the internet, man. There's just whatever.
it's back. It's back.
So yeah, it's really it's hard in those moments because the only way when you're just dealing with Batman, right, as a character, you understand very well how many amazing stories have been written about this character. He's your favorite character. You understand the legacy of all of it. You know how many fans love him, how he belongs to everybody, not just you. And you're just getting through that. Like that's a very hard sort of forest to navigate. And you have to be able to put on those blinders and say, I'm doing my version, me and Greg, and this is our one, and I'm writing it. Nobody's going to read it. It's just us. Like, I'm doing fan fiction. Whatever gets you through it. And then with an event, like, they will have you out there, like I said, and it's not just the normal suits. It's everybody. So you'll be in a boardroom, and there's like 100 people who you don't know at all that are from different divisions, that even down to like the people that make pins, like the free stuff they give away at cons, that are like, what can I get out of this? Like, are there any pins? And you're like, I don't know if there are any pins. So it's a lot. Like, it's a lot of pressure, yeah. But the only thing I'd say again is like, it's a great joy too, because when you get to do a story that drives the entire DCU, or allows you to incorporate the whole DCU, and there are no limitations like I have now on Justice League, where they're just like, it's like your mom and dad were like, here are the keys to the Corvette, son, just go drive it, and you're like, really? That feeling is the best, because you grew up on these characters. And look, I mean, creator owned is a whole nother thing, where there's another joy that comes from doing your own stuff. But if you like writing superhero comics, this is the pinnacle, where you get total creative latitude over the entire universe. So at first there were a tremendous amount of hurdles. There was a lot of pushback. And, the thing that I would say is, if you're in comics or you're interested in comics, the key is that it's a collaborative medium. And the fact that's the other thing I learned on that issue 5 with Greg, was that they didn't want us to turn that comic around like this.
No.
And he wrote this really impassioned email that was like, he quoted Steve Jobs and this like whole, he was like this whole, like, it was beautiful. And I was like, what he said. And what you learn is that when you hit those barriers where they are like, well, you can't do that, or if you do that, you're going to be in trouble, and we lost faith in you. When your partner comes in and says, well, I believe in that, whether it's art, writing, they back off. And so you have such different leverage and such different confidence when you have a team. Like, Metal is all about me and Greg. It's about the way in which both comics have helped me through very dark times when I've been, in depression or that stuff. And the things that helped me through were almost usually the most lunatic stories possible, the craziest, most Kirby-esque, zany ones.
I want to interject what you're saying, because sometimes you can have allies in the camp over there. Like, even, when I wanted to do, this for the cover one, I mean, I knew what they wanted from me. I knew they wanted the Star Wars poster with the dramatic upshot of JLA, and the stuff we've all seen a million times. And why have we seen it a million times? Because it's a surefire, safe bet. You do this. Yeah, but is it memorable? Most often not, because we've seen it so many times. Now, I've been in the business for so long, and I could certainly just give them that and not give it a second thought. Those designs all laid out, And but I just go, I've got to find a different angle on this thing. I spent 3 days just trying to rip that stuff out of my head, because one of the other pearls of wisdom they gave me when I was trying to get up is go look at everything and then forget everything you've ever seen. Was one of the other great pearls. So anyway, I finally come up with this, and they pushed back hard on me, and I was pretty furious because I was adamant. I said, I know what you want, and I could give that to you, but you've given me, you pay me a lot of money to be creative and try and give you something new and fresh, which that's what you're supposed to do in everything, is come up with something new and fresh. Don't keep going over the same old ground. And I said, this encapsulates the essence. It's the fun that this symbolizes, and it's metal, you know. And I was really upset. Dan DiDio, who's my evil twin, was saying I couldn't do it. And Jim Lee said to Dan, said, if an artist believes something so passionately, you have to just get out of their way and let them do it. So there you go. You can have an ally, you know, who's in the camp, who hears your plight and decides to stand up for you. And so that was a benefit there. And they did. And it turned out to be great, because fans were tweeting me pictures, and they put like the poly bag around it, and they stick their hand in it, like, you know, it was their hand. And so people had fun, which is what the idea was. And then there was also that people might not know that's what it is. And I said, the smart kids in the room will get it, and they'll tell the ones who are a little slower, and it'll all work out. And but we got to give thanks to Jim Lee, you know, because he went to bat right there. So
Nice.
You pitched this as an event, yes? It wasn't just here's my next story.
No, it was always meant as an event.
Okay. And first event you pitched?
Yeah, I never thought I'd get to do an event.
Yeah.
It's like my whole career is like, oh, I'm never going to get to do that. And then they just like, do you want to do that? I mean, so I thought I was going to like be in prose, and maybe I'd get to do backups on Detective. And then they were like, you have backups on Detective? Actually, you want the whole book? And that was Black Mirror. And then, you know, Batman, do you want to do an arc on Batman? That was Court of Owls, and then Joker, and so on. So when they said, do you want to do an event? I mean, that to me was terrifying, but I had this story I had been building in my head, and I knew he was going to do some of the Mark Miller stuff, and then he was going to come back, and so I thought it would be pretty perfect. But it was really, at first, I mean, it was just a lot. There's a whole logistical, like, you forget that it's corporate. That's all I would say, is like, you forget, because like I'm in my cave, you know, my kids think that like I go to work in my pajamas, which I do all day. The other day, actually, like I was wearing jeans, I was dressed like this, and my older son is like, Dad, why are you dressed up? And I was like, I'm just dressed, like that's how you dress. But you know, they think that's the job, is like, and it is a lot of the time. It's you in a creative bubble with these people that inspire you, making things you love. And then what you get reminded of is that no, it's a whole like nebulous system of constellation of people, and so much money rides on it. Yeah. And with an event, it was like, well, what are the tie-ins? How much? What quarter do they fall in? Where are you gonna? You know, what are the repercussions? And that math was just amazingly fascinating, and also really scary. And now that I've learned it,
that math?
Or? Yeah, I'm doing that math. But with the help of the editors, with Tay Taylor, amazing editor, right. Mark Doyle, like, you know, all of it, like just trying to figure out, well, what do they really want? You know, and then it's a different language. You realize they don't care about your story that much. No. They don't really care, you know, and you're like, guess what happens then? Twist. It's not Alfred. They could give two shits about that. They're like, what's the toy? What's the, you know, and when you give them that and you realize... Yeah. When you give them that, they suddenly relax. And so it was a real learning curve for me. But now that I've learned it, I feel like, you know, not like Jedi or whatever, but I definitely feel like that was the pinnacle of negotiating that kind of like the commercialism of comics and the creativity of comics was that, because they depend on it. And if you fuck that up, like if an event bombs and it drags, it's like the Titanic. It drags down all those tie-in books, all that stuff, and that's a big deal to them. Like that's not just a big deal like, oh yeah, you got a bad review on CBR. That is a big deal. Like that's a lot of
shareholders.
Yeah, people get fired over that stuff. You know, you too. I mean, like, you know, a lot
No,
of...
and I don't get
Yeah.
to feed my children.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
as a
the
retailer,
story-
yeah.
yeah, the
No,
stories.
They just put me with a new rider.
Yeah, right, exactly. And you're like, he's great.
Um,
He's great. Like that.
And, you know, and I think if you look at history, you see that most events really don't work creatively as a creative thing, right?
I believe
because
that, yeah.
because the machine kind of takes over and it like leeches all the creativity out of it, which is
It was
what's so
hard.
fantastic about this book. I think is that it even at the most tie-in part of the tie-ins, right? You could still see that there was this just kernel of mad ideas and passion.
We were maniacal about
Yeah.
that. I mean, I looked over every page of everything
Yeah.
with James and Josh and
Yeah.
made sure that, you know, and I really believe it was honestly because I felt that people are cynical about events.
Yeah.
And why not, right? Like, they're trying to get your money. They're trying to be like, buy 25 issues. And we were really careful about trying to be like, this is going to be 6 issues of us, 2 tie-ins, and then, you know, 2 interstitial issues, and then a certain amount of tie-ins, and each one of those is going to be special. And it really hurt my, not to be like, woe is me, my diamond shoes are so tight, but I would just say like that was a hard, that was
I'm asking for a raise. I don't have diamond shoes.
that it hurts your life like that. I mean, we watched every single issue coming out of that, making sure it was good enough because I was so scared of letting you guys down about having any tie-in or anything not be up to par. And the people did a great job. Everybody was great. But I mean, I was on it. We were on vacation. I remember me and my family took a vacation in Hawaii. And through that, I was like, hey, I'm just going to go get another Mai Tai. And I'm like looking over Gotham Resistance, like, you know, like that. Like, but the fact that...
And it grew too, right? Like it grew bigger.
It did. It was actually, we lucked out. It was the most successful DC, you know, comics event they've done. So I was very proud of that. But I really believe that it's... Yeah, I really believe that the success is because we tried to...
The 42.
Is that...
Sorry, I'm ordering my wife around.
Can I was going to ask if I can have a drink as well. He's getting...
Oh yeah,
tequila.
yeah.
But-
Hey, someone go
That's
back
not a
and...
Scotch glass you're using, right? That's a Scotch glass. Florida's
Yeah, there's a whiskey back there and the soda's on top of the fridge.
Greg,
Hold me a beer while you're at it.
Everything.
look at this.
Red cup. We're drinking out of red cups. Yeah. Well, there's a lot more questions in there I could ask, I think, but you know, in the interest of...
Am I mixing this?
Yeah, we're mixing it. Yeah. It's all good. So I want to turn to the audience because I've been talking a lot, and I'm sure you guys have a couple of questions or 3. Who would like to ask a question? There you go. Go for it.
I heard a lot of talk about Batman #5, and that's really kind of my favorite thing that I read from both of you guys. So I wanted to hear a little bit about kind of when it came back, right, and like you started like noticing the turn, and like how long did it take to like be horizontal, and how many pages were like the other way around, and the advertising and all that stuff, like.
Well, yeah, for anybody that doesn't know, Batman 5, basically Batman's lost in this labyrinth, the Court of Owls. I'm sure most of you guys know this one, but yeah, so basically the comic, as you're reading it and he gets more lost, it turns around like this. So as it forces you to turn it and then read it kind of backwards, like this. So as it was going, Greg made this, like I said, this impassioned email, and I was sort of like, ditto, 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 thank you.
Yes.
And cheers, Greg. And so they finally let us do it, and we were really excited about it. And the funniest thing was, so first they sent it as a PDF, which scrolls vertically. So I read it, and I was like, oh, yeah. See, those pussies, it's no big deal. Like, it just goes like this. And then I got the print. And the print, I didn't realize that, like, to read it, you'd have to reverse it and then read backwards. Yep. And I was sort of like, oh, God, there's a misprint. And then I remember, like, realizing it wasn't a misprint, and so I tweeted out, I was like, anything that you see in Batman 5 is on purpose. And then I get a call from him, like, 30 seconds later that's like, what are you doing? He's like, if they get it, they get it. If they don't, they don't. And I'm like, all right. Like, I was like, all right, delete. Like, so I deleted the tweet. And then the funniest thing was then he got his comms, and the same thing happened. He read it, and he was like, there's a goddamn misprint. And like,
I was furious because I had gone over it with Marks, methodically over and over 3 times, and I never anticipated that you would have to flip the other way, because I've got all my boards and I go, yes, okay, now you turn it and then you turn it at this page, and I never considered that, and so at first I freaked out like Scott, and I was like mad, and I was ready to pick up the phone and start yelling at people, and then all of a sudden it dawned on me, and then I go, this is even better. This is even more confusing. I'm going to claim genius status now. Yeah, I panicked, and I saw why they panicked. But I think it worked even better that way because because Batman was tripping on that. He, the hallucinogenics in the water and everything like that. So I go, it really just helps to really immerse the reader in that. And for those who complained about your iPad, I'm going to say 2 things. One, it has a lock button, but if you're not that clever, even a dumb squirrel like me would have set it down and walked around the iPad.
Dude, I wish you could have seen this thing they did at San Diego. I made a video.
Jonathan sent it to me.
It's incredible. They did this whole Court of Owls like activation where they had these actors playing the parts, and it was crazy. You walk in, and it scared me like 5 times. It was so embarrassing. But you walk in, and they had a whole labyrinth, and this actor runs out, and he's like, I've been in here for years, and he's like all old and grizzled with like. And then you walk down, they had the pictures from it, and they had the Talon, and it was so. I tried to keep sending it to you, just being like, if you'd seen it, was really cool.
I did see some.
Yeah.
One of the questions that he asked, I don't think you actually heard the question. One of the parts of the question was about the pagination and the advertisements, right? Like, did you take into account when you were laying out that issue? I'm going to have ads on pages 3, 5, whatever the numbers are.
Sadly, they don't do what they do in Image, which is just pile those in the back, and so that doesn't interrupt the art. I think it's disruptive. I hate it, but they're usually good at figuring. They know where things are supposed to go, where it's less disruptive. So I usually don't have to butt in. They kind of are going to do their thing, and I stick to the rule of even numbers are on the left-hand side, and so on. The only time it really aggravated me was when they truncated our pages and put some.
Do you remember that? The Kit Kat thing?
Candy bar ad.
Yeah.
Oh man, that
really ruined that story.
But we put in that joke. That was my favorite thing. Where basically, if you guys don't know, in one point for some weird reason, DC made a deal with Kit Kat and Reese's. And so they cut half the comic book page, like in the middle, every single comic.
I need another drink. Roll it up again.
It was like every single comic halfway down a certain page was a Reese's ad or a Twix ad or whatever. And they were everyone was upset. And then in our comic, it happened to fall right when Jim Gordon was Batman. He was trying on this like crazy robot Batman suit. And we made this joke where we were like, oh, look at Batman, he's so corporate, what are you gonna do? Like put a big advertisement halfway down this thing, right? And they were really, like, it got through, and then they got really upset. All the calls from Diane and everybody, and I was like, I'll buy so many Reese's.
I'll tell you what, if DC ever wants to be done with me, all I have to do is do it again, because I said that will be it. If you ever do this to any of my books again, I don't care if you do it to every other book, but if you ever do it to mine again, I am gone.
Yeah.
And so if I am ever gone, you'll know that they put another goddamn Twix ad or whatever on my pages, truncating.
Yeah.
I still, this is really, I go, would you do this in a movie? I go, no. A product placement, if you want me to draw something in there like they do in the movies, that's not disruptive. I go, but just truncate the pages. I go, you're really selling out. It really aggravated me, And it was funny because I called, I sent this email going, who was the dumb motherfucker who came up with this idea, And Dan DiDio goes, oh, that would be me. And I go, well, you're a dumb motherfucker. I was really upset about it. So, yeah. So unwittingly, I called the boss, dumb,
There was that Snickers ad too that had like a Superman
Yeah.
being upset at Wonder Woman or something, and like
She turned into like Grodd.
Right, yeah, and there were several books that month that had actually ruined the comic because there wasn't a separation between the Superman pages and the ads. Yeah, Seth, yeah.
So I'm curious because you guys keep bringing things up that indicate that you're sort of the enfant terrible of DC Comics, and you get away with it, both of you, and it's interesting because the stories I think are fantastic and they're engaging. They have so much energy, but if those stories are working for you guys, why are they? It looks like that they're sitting on the energy for other people's books.
You mean like why do they fight it at first?
Yeah. And if they're fighting it with you guys and it winds up working, doesn't that indicate that they shouldn't be fighting it with other people's books?
I tell them that all the time. As a matter of fact, I usually whisper in their ear, "Issue 5, bitches."
Yeah. He really will. He'll send an email that just says issue 5.
I mean, certainly, when you're making a company money, they will give you more latitude and get out of your way. But they are still the same machine, and so those reflexes are still in place. And like with most things, it's comfortable. We know this is the path that works. So when you move them outside that comfort zone, that's when they kind of want to brush up on you, and you have to kind of push back a little bit. And one of the things I say, I think the guy from Decca Records who didn't sign the Beatles must have committed suicide. I know I would have. We don't want that new crazy sound. It doesn't. We want this tried and true old sound that we're accustomed to. And so that's one of the arguments I use. I go, you just don't get anything. You'd never discover the Beatles or whatever big thing if you always stick with the old and the comfortable. But it's the knee-jerk reaction that you can expect, but we have a little more freedom because we've tallied so many successes in a row. But I don't think it'll ever stop. You have shareholders, you have the same old machine think, and it is what it is.
Does that make you want to do creator owned rather than staying with company stuff, or do you just like the toys so much?
Well, no, we will do creator owned. I still want to bring the Creech back. Scott said he'd be on board for that, and Scott's got a cool idea, that we'll get to, and we'll do that as well. That's fun, like Scott said earlier. It's fun in a different way. Listen, it's fun drawing Batman. It's fun drawing all the heroes I've drawn throughout my career. The reason I got into comic books is because I love those characters, and I wanted to be able to draw those characters. So my dream has come true. So I'm certainly not complaining that I have to draw Batman today. That's fantastic that I get to draw Batman today. So no, we'll get to that, and it'll be fun. And then you don't have anybody looking over your shoulder, and you don't have any ads interrupting you things. So you have all that benefit, and you're controlling the whole show. You don't get as much sales, because there are fans who they only go to the big two, and some are only, I only go to DC or I only go to Marvel, and they won't follow you as much as they love you. I've had it happen. They'll go, "Oh, I'm so glad you're back in the mainstream." So there's some trade-off. You lose sort of some of your fans that follow you, but the advantage is that you really get to do whatever you want, and that's the closest you get to when you're a little kid and you're just doing your creative writing, or you're just drawing whatever characters you are in a sketch pad just for the fun of it out of your imagination. That's the closest you get to it, and so that's the appeal. Even if you don't make as much money, that's the appeal, because it brings you back to that spirit of discovery and creativity that you have when you're new to life, So
and when you do something like, say, a Reborn with Mark in between Batman,
that was a blast.
And does that recharge your batteries for the big corporate projects?
Again, what was fun about that again was I got to create this whole world and all these characters, and they were mine. But I never gave it a thought like I'm not corporate. I'm doing this. I'm illustrating. I'm taking a great story and I'm going, how can I, bring this thing to life? The joy of bringing it to life is the same. You know, if I'm drawing Batman or I'm drawing Reborn, you know, I just had more freedom, a little bit more freedom. But I've never felt stifled on any of the hero books I've ever drawn. So, you know, again, maybe that it's because that burden falls more to the writer. I mean, the only time that I'm going to get anything is if I go, hey, I want to draw some absurd things like, you know, Batman with his pecker hanging out or some stupid thing, you know, which why would I do something so stupid? So I've never felt like I had to stay in a certain lane. Anywhere I've gone has never been too far or too outside the norm for them. So I don't feel the restriction really. You know, you just got to stay true to the character, and you would want to do that anyway because you love the character.
Absolutely, absolutely. Second row, yeah, you, yeah.
Given that you guys talk about collaboration so closely, and you know, you as a writer and Greg as an artist, but somewhat of a director, what sort of things outside of comics do you guys pull from as creators? You know, what would you like direct people who want to make comics to look at, whether films or books or music or whatever?
You would know better than me. I mean, in terms of like, if you're a writer and you're an aspiring, you know, comic book writer, it's really similar to televisual writing and also screenplay. There's a lot of lessons in those books, like, you know, screenplay by Sid Field or how to make a good screenplay great. Learning 3-act structure, understanding those things is key for me. I always kind of use that as almost like a protractor to like those kind of 3-act structure sort of designs to measure against how I'm doing an arc or doing kind of a meta story over 3 or 4 arcs. So they're great tools to have, but ultimately it's more about, I think, honestly just making your own stuff and learning how to do it through that, you know, in that regard. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, listen, we all are on the same mud ball spinning around in space together. And that's where it all comes from. Everything that you're experiencing, you know, and it gets into you on a subconscious level. All the music you listen to, all the movies you watch, all the TV, all the books you read, all the things you just go by on the street, walking, conversations you've had, conversations you've overheard. All that stuff is in you. And so that's where the well is. It's in all of your experiences. And the thing about it is, like Scott mentioned, tools. Okay, so now we've all watched movies, and so kind of, you know, on a subconscious level, we picked up how movies work, but you can still make a lot of mistakes because you don't have all the fine details. So now, if you get a book that teaches you film directing, and as Scott said, you know, 3-act storytelling and things, now you go back and watch the movie. Now, all of a sudden, now you could see the map. And so you still have all the well, and now you just take like the logical side of your brain and like superimpose that. So now you have this little film of logic, you know, and reason and rules, you know, for lack of a better word, and you pull from your well and drag it up through that membrane, and boom, then that's where it all comes from.
Yeah, makes
like
sense.
people would ask me, where, you know, how, you know, you're Batman, where's that come from? You know, and I go, I don't know. I've been seeing Batman my whole life, like you've been seeing Batman. My first drawing of a superhero is of Batman and Robin when I was age 4. So why? Because I watched the Batman '66 TV show, you know, and I saw the comic books, I saw the cartoons, and whatever. So you've done the same thing. So my well is the same as you. What you draw from that's where the uniqueness comes forth, because that's your personality. It comes, all that you've seen and all that you've heard and all that you've done, all now comes through your personal filter. And that's one of the other beauties of this whole thing. If you sat 10 artists in a room and told them to draw the bowl of fruit that's in front of them, they would all be that bowl of fruit, but they would all be different because everybody has their own filter. And so that's where your uniqueness will come in. So that's my take.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. I mean, this is a thing that we see in the Graphic Novel Club. This is the, I want to say 37th to 38th interview we've done in a row for the Adult Club, and I've never heard the same answer twice from any creator of how do you draw comics, why comics. Everybody comes at it in their own way, in a way that I find is probably different than people who are doing film or people who are doing prose, you know? Just because the canvas is so much bigger in comics in a sense, you know?
Yeah, you have no budget.
Exactly.
That's the fun thing.
Yeah.
I would write the shit out of that bowl of fruit.
Very good. Do we have another question?
Well, I mean, you could use the same example with writing. You know, if you were all given the same assignment and you were to write a short story on whatever topic and it had to be this subject matter, everybody would write a different story. You know, even if they provided you with key scenes, because it would still go through your filter and be influenced by your personal life experiences. And that's the beauty of life, baby.
Tina in the back.
So I guess like one of my biggest
Greg will never
questions
hear
was when so Court of Owls came out in like 2011, and then Gotham, the TV show, like used it very quickly after in their script. Like, how did you guys? I know it's a very different type of the side of the business, but like, how did that feel, or like, what did you guys think when it was accepted into the mainstream?
Well, it's cool, but it'd been more delightful if I had gotten a paycheck.
We got paid eventually. We got paid.
Yeah. Well, no, you know, it's flattering, right? I mean, to see anything done with anything that you've been involved with, whether it's a toy or something showing up in a TV show or a pin. You know, it's great. You know, it's all the stuff that you didn't look for and didn't anticipate and didn't even desire when you got involved with doing comic books. You know, I mean, all the stuff, all of it is just, it's all gravy. Fans wanting to hear what you have to say, like you guys. You know, people wanting your autograph. Who thought of that? You know, traveling around to conventions. Nobody thought of that stuff. We just go, I like comic books. So when something like Court of Owls that Scott had this brilliant idea for. Swelling his head a little more, but I think it's one of the most brilliant things he's done for Batman's mythos. It's just unbelievable. You just go, wow, how cool is that? You know, but we're both, Scott and I, and most everybody in the business, we're traveling at such a velocity. When you make comics, it's a conveyor belt, and you don't have as much time luxurious time to lay back and go, oh, look at what nice things they're doing. That'll come later when you're not at the fast pace that you go and make comics, but it's just great joy and flattery.
Yeah, it is. It's great. I mean, yeah, when you see it and they have plans for Court of Owls and other things as well, and it's a real thrill and honor. And I'm always very much like, because they'll ask like, what do you want to be involved in it? And I would, but I mean, I'm so happy doing what I do that I just like seeing people take the stuff that we made and then make it theirs. So I'm always excited to see like a new interpretation of the stuff that we've done. So
yeah, no fears about them getting it wrong.
No, I mean, I'd rather them make it their own thing and do it something that they believe in, and if they fail with that, that's fine. I mean, I've seen a lot of different stuff. All the independent stuff that I've done, Witches and Severed and American Vampire 2, they're all in different stages of development with TV and film, and you watch people take the stuff and find these amazing sort of reinterpretations in their own vision of it, and it's exciting, it's inspiring, it makes you go back and do it differently. So with Court of Owls, as long as we get to be in the back with the masks, like, like you'll know it's us with like the two masks.
Yeah, you'll know it's
Not
mine.
scary
I'll take a black Sharpie and I'll do this stuff right here.
Yeah.
Put some shades on over the mask. Go, I think I know who that guy is. And Scott, we'll put a really high eyebrow on yours.
Yeah.
Nice. Any follow up, Tina? No? Okay. Anybody else? Yeah.
Well, Greg just kind of alluded to it that working in comics is kind of a breathless task. You have monthly deadlines breathing over your neck all the time. Has it gotten easier?
You're just like making me super.
There must be a Justice League script due right now, right?
I did it.
Okay.
Well, does it become easier? Has it become easier for either of you over time to comfortably lay something to bed? Like, okay, maybe it's not as good as it could be if I had 20 more days, but
No.
this is what it is.
Not me.
No.
I don't know about you. I'm still awful. He knows. No,
Well,
I'll work
go
on
ahead.
it till the last minute. I mean, I'm definitely better about understanding like it has to be ripped from my hands like when it goes, and that they'll be like, you have to hand that in. But I don't know, I take pride in that. I mean, I feel like this is my dream job, and I'm very lucky to do it. And, you know, we've done well enough that, like, you know, my wife does. When we got married, it was like, I'm always gonna be the poet tramp, and you have a real job. You're a doctor, you know, and like I'm the one that works, you know, and that the whole dynamic of that, you know, and us going out there and being able to create this stuff, like it really does, it sits with you in the way that, you know, I don't know, for me at least, you go to work knowing you have the best job possible, and you keep, for me, like, you keep aware of the fact that thousands of people would murder you for that job all the time, and if you aren't delivering the book that you would die to put on the shelf every issue, you might as well quit and let somebody else do it, because they deserve the shot that you're taking up by filling that slot on a book like Batman. Like, if you're writing Batman, or you're writing Justice League or Metal or whatever, there's so many writers out there and artists that are deserving of a shot, and that want to do that and have ideas, that you better be bringing your best stuff all the time. So no, for me at least, like, it's still not easy to let go of stuff, and it's, you know, I get very neurotic about it, but, you know, I like to think that that's a point of pride too, that I will say this, like, on my kids, I've never let an issue out the door that I didn't do my best to make the best I could. It doesn't mean that I haven't let issues out the door that have been, you know, like, very flawed. I'm sure I have, but not for lack of trying. I've never phoned it in, and I can say that very proudly, and that's the way I feel. Like, I will never do that. You'll never see me be like, here's an issue of Justice League, you know, that will never happen. And
For me, when I first started, you know, it took a lot of work. That was the realization that, wow, you know, 'cause you pick up comics and they're great and everything like that, and then you realize when you're actually hired that, oh, it's not a magic wand process. You actually have to. There's labor involved here. I remember, like, one of my first second gigs there at Marvel, you know, staying up for one time to hit the deadline. I stayed for 48 hours straight drawing. I remember whimpering as I was going along. I got very fast when I was on Spawn, and that was due to a few things. One was they had great paper quality back in those days. I really miss that. Paper now slows me down. I had a different style. I had a different writer. The subject matter of Spawn was such that, you know, you could move along quickly. You know, you didn't want to draw stuff. You had a very big cape to cover up a lot of detailed backgrounds with, and it was all in shadows and a lot of rubble. Right? So you had all that. But actually, I find the deadlines more challenging now because of along with those things that I just mentioned. I continue to get more and more critical of my own work as I go. So whereas most guys who've been at it for as long as I have might just be phoning it in and, you know, rest on their laurels and, you know, just going through the motions, and I'm like the complete opposite of that. I look at it in the same way, Scott. You're very lucky to have, you know, this job that we dreamed about. It's my dream job. It's difficult plenty of times, and to hit those deadlines, Scott will tell you, you know, my normal work schedule has for many years now been 7 days a week, 12 to 16 hours a day, which is not healthy for you at all. You know, it's dangerous to treat your body that way, and you have no life, you know, essentially. Which is why I've never sacrificed quality. If I saw a page that I didn't like, it didn't matter if I had spent 16 hours. The next day, I will tear it up and I will redraw that page. It didn't matter. It doesn't matter the deadline. The matter is giving the readers the most bang for the buck and make sure it's the best it can be. Because I look at it this way: I'm pretty high up the ladder, perch-wise, you know, of Illustrator hierarchy. And, you know, I don't take that for granted, you know, and I would say even to my teammates, you know, Jonathan, I go, it's like prize fighting. You know, you did your road work, you had so many fights, and you managed to get the championship belt. They gave it to you. Well, now you got to work even harder, because I'm aware of all the great artists there are in the business. I mean, it's the most there's ever been in one spot now, and you don't think everybody wants to be in the same spot that I'm fortunate enough to be in. So I work very, very hard You know, for a couple of reasons. One is, you know, I like my spot and I'd like to keep it for as long as I can. And also, you know, comics cost a lot of money, and I want to make sure that you feel that when you flip through it, you got your money's worth. And so I don't ever want to sacrifice. But I realize that as I'm getting older, it's not healthy to keep going at the pace I've been going. So I've got it, you know, arranged with DC that, you know, they're going to give me more liberty, more time, and let me start working ahead of the project so that I can take a day off, maybe kiss my wife here and there, you know, and see a friend or two that I haven't seen in a long time. But no, it doesn't. For me, it's not gotten easier, but I think that's for a lot of reasons. And as long as you care intensely about your craft, I don't think it should get easier. If anything, it should follow my path where you get more and more critical, because as you go through life, you see more, you understand more, and you want and desire more. And so I'm always still pushing. So no, it's not gotten easier.
Yeah. I think we have time for one more question. Miranda, do you have your hand up?
It's actually the gentleman in front of me.
My eyes were wrong. Go for it. Yes.
This is a question primarily for Scott, but Greg, if you have thoughts on it, I'd be super interested too. Scott, as someone who started writing in prose, or rather text, and moved into comics, have you ever felt the boundaries of writing comics, graphic films, in a good way or a bad way? And with respect to metal specifically, I believe I heard that you guys worked or collaborated with Neil Gaiman, someone who goes between text and graphic novels. Did you learn anything interesting from him working on that?
Yeah, I mean, the most interesting thing I learned, Neil is amazing, and he's an idol of mine, and I've met him, I've been lucky enough to meet him many times, but I think the best piece of advice he gave me, I was at a dinner with him a while ago, like, I you know, before metal and whatever. It was one of the first times I had met him, and I've met him many times since, and I was sitting next to him, and I was freaking out about Batman because I was nervous that I wasn't good enough, and I was a fraud, and all that stuff. And I remember he said to me, "What's the matter?" And I won't do his accent because it always sounds like I'm trying to do like a Jamaican accent. It sounds awful. But he was like, I told him, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm so worried, whatever." And he's like, "Oh, Scott." He's like, "Right now you're worried you're not good enough. Very soon you'll be worried you used to be better." So that's it. It's just like a perpetual emotion, anxiety, you know, terror machine.
Right.
But no, he was wonderful. And what you're asking, I think, you know, I like knowing that I love all the different medium. I love working in prose and doing a book like After Death. I like the big bombast of, you know, metal. My favorite writers like Jason Aaron and others are the ones that don't just mind one vein. I love writers and creators that kind of do one thing really well and do it multiple times in that area, and I admire them. You know, there's some of my favorite stuff comes from that kind of work ethic. But my very favorite writers are the ones that are able to mine the same vein of interest. You know, whatever their subject matter is, you realize it's them no matter what. But they can do giant cartoonish crazy stuff. And they can do incredibly intimate, needlepoint, dark, literary stuff. And they can do experimental. And you'll always recognize it's them because they're probing material that you recognize as their sort of conversation with themselves, with the world. So I love the elasticity of comics in that regard, and the fact that I can bring in prose when I do. I'm doing a little bit of prose on The Batman Who Laughs and that stuff. That it gives me the opportunity to incorporate a lot of different styles at once. So yeah, it doesn't feel restrictive to me, and I enjoy the back and forth. When I go into a metal, I know what it's going to be. You know, when I do Justice League, it's like, this is Super Friends on crack. Like, that's what it's going to be, and that's it. And then when I do, you know, a literary book or I do Witches, that's going to be personal. I'm going to write essays, and all of it's personal, don't get me wrong. But it's just translating it into the language of either like comic book lunacy or, you know, going straight raw and doing whatever you're going to do in that way.
I like that answer.
Good.
I really like that answer.
Glad.
So the next thing you two are doing together,
yes,
is Batman: The Last Night Knigget.
Yeah,
on
they
Earth.
haven't like announced the title yet, but tentatively it was called Last Night on Earth. It's basically it's going to be our last Batman thing together. But it's sort of a big opus, and it's a story that
I'll be working with Tom King next.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. You gonna have Catwoman not get married?
I love Tom. No, but it's really, it imagines our version of Batman 25 years in the future. And I'm very, very proud of it. It's the other person that it's been, like, Neil's been a big influence, but so is Grant Morrison, and I've been lucky enough to become friends with both of them, you know, or at least friends with Grant. Neil I'm friendly with. But Grant I've talked to many times at this point, and he was one of the ones, again, that gave me advice when I was starting out and I was terrified on Batman. He was like, what you have to do is give him a birth and give him a death. And once you do that, your version of him, you'll own the character. And 0 Year was my response to that about our origin for our character, and this is the death of our character. Or not the death necessarily, but the end of our version of Batman. So it completes the whole 10-year cycle. By then, by the time it comes out, it will have been, 8-9 years. So I feel it's almost a good decade of us, doing Batman in that regard.
Hey.
Yeah, I know.
Time flies when you're making comics.
Yeah. When's it supposed to come out?
We're not allowed to say, but January.
I like that.
And one of the reasons is because I just bought a second home, and so that's causing a lot of disruption in life for me, going back and forth between two places and trying to get all that. So they just go, we're just going to push that off instead of, me being scattershot and trying to hit all the marks. So part of that's because of what's going on in life, and DC is being kind.
Yeah.
His new home is like a bat. It's like Wayne Manor, but in Arizona.
Oh, that's amazing. It's going to be a bigger format. Yeah. Are you?
I'm
working for that format, or yeah? Okay.
No, I'm working standard size. I know a lot of guys doing the larger format. I haven't done that in years, and I figure I spend so much time drawing. More space to draw is really not really what appealed to me. Going up,
Sure.
More territory I got to cover.
Sure.
But it'll be just as good, and if they want, they can blow it up.
Yeah. How long is the story? Is it just a graphic novel, or?
I'm not supposed to say, but I'll say it anyway.
Don't say it that.
All right.
It's going to be 3 oversized issues.
It's meant to be like the way Black Label works is they're going to do like 50-page issues basically, so it's going to be like 3 issues that size. So
Cool.
3
Nice.
big.
Scott is like the most spoilery guy I've ever met.
I like it. I like it.
It's like doing it in the morning.
Yeah.
Well, he had on a panel, and it goes, I'm not supposed to say anything, and then he says it. There's been times where I've had to grab him by the neck because he's giving away the whole book.
Yeah. This is going to be on the internet afterwards. All right.
It's like at midnight, I just turn into spoilers.
Yeah.
My carriage turns into a spoiler pumpkin.
I like it. Oh, I could keep going with this conversation
I know,
forever, but it's getting late. The book was metal. This book was great, right, guys?
Yeah.
If every superhero comic was like this, we'd be selling 250,000 copies of every superhero comic, because this is the way it should be. I really want to thank both of you guys for this, not just for the work, but clearly for the passion and love that you both have for comics and the medium, and I can't say enough good things about that. I want to thank you for videoing in. I want to thank you for flying in. That's kind of insane. And I want to thank you guys for the book. Programming notes, next month, our Graphic Novel Month Club is nice. Nate Powell. Nate Powell is a National Book Award winner. Come Again is a fantastic book. He did March with Representative Lewis, so he's really good. I hope you all come out to that. That's August 15th, I want to say. And our next kids club is Cotton's Secret of the Wind. Even though this is a kids club book, I actually really recommend all of you adults look at this as well, because this is a really fantastic book. It's kind of, actually it says it on the cover, Jeff Smith says, it's like Wind in the Willows and Animal Farm together in one gorgeous graphic novel. And that is really pretty accurate. This is actually too old for most of the kids, but I liked it enough that I decided to make it a kids club book. The month after, we've got Lisa Hannawalt, who most of you probably know from BoJack Horseman. She's going to be the next adult club. So we've got a good lineup coming up. But thank you guys for coming out. Thank you guys for coming out. Thanks so much. We'll see you next month. Thank you.
Bye, Greg.